Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Going Out, Looking In, the podcast about the big questions of life, personal growth, and spirituality. My name is Maxi, and today we are exploring the world of Michael Singer, Surrender, the Temple of the Universe, and my experience with Mickey on a walk. All of that just happened a couple of weeks ago during my trip to the US, and I had the honor and privilege to be getting time one-on-one with Mickey to ask him all the questions that were burning inside of me for so many years now since I've been following him. And this video and this episode in particular is just for you to learn from him in that way, because I feel like over time, having read all of his books, having listened to all of the podcast episodes, all of the interviews that he gave, there were certain questions that I had and wanted to have answered all this time. And so I was basically looking forward to someone like myself to go there and ask those questions. And just because I now have the podcast and I have this vehicle, I was like, okay, well, I just, I shoot my shot and just, reach out, and gratefully and thankfully. And I'm still sort of trying to wrap my head around how that came to be. I was granted the opportunity to go on a one-on-one walk with him and to spend time with, his extended family of the temple. And that was just an unforgettable experience. And out of that basically sort of grows what I sense is a responsibility to also pass on the knowledge and the teachings. Now, I want to start this episode by just giving a little bit of maybe like a disclaimer, like a personal sort of anecdote and story, and like a little bit of a flavor, and something that I sort of also struggle with going into this episode. And that is just the overall like dilemma of the huge humility that I feel towards Michael Singer, but also all of the teachings and the maybe like sacred and holy environments where all of this is taking place. So going to Florida and experiencing that firsthand, and then at the same time me having this outlet of like sharing with others, and to bring that together, because like I feel there is certain things in life that need to be experienced like personally, and each one of us has to go on this journey themselves. And so that's also the reason why there's only, at least for me, very few photos and things that I basically took from my time there, because I just wanted to be fully immersed and fully present with what is. And the digital technology, in my opinion, is oftentimes not really, it just intuitively doesn't feel right. Energetically, it feels off to bring a smartphone into a temple or something like that and make videos or something. And also me now sharing about this experience is so personal to me. The relationship also that I established unto Michael Singer and what he told me is somewhat like intimate. And so I will not share everything, and just, I don't know, I felt like I wanted to have expressed that sort of like the understanding and the respect and the humility that I have towards everything that happened there. And at the same time, my role as somebody who has an outlet to share this message and pass on the knowledge, because I really think that if more people were coming in touch with like the teachings of Michael Singer, but therefore yoga and meditation, mindfulness, and also surrender, and all of these beautiful things, I feel like the world would be a much better place. So that's my little tiny 5 cents, and my little contribution to this movement, right? Okay, so diving straight in, I will, divide this episode in a couple of different chapters. I'm first gonna give you a little bit of a story and context around who Michael Singer actually really even is, who is that guy, for all the people who've never heard of him, or maybe provide a little bit more of a background. And then I will move on to share about the temple, my travels there, how I experienced the grounds, the overall energy. And then I'm gonna be moving on to talk about, Michael Singer himself, how is he in the world? How is his energy? What is he like? And then finally, I want to share some of my learnings, some of the takeaways, and some of the conversations that I shared with him. All right, so let's dive straight into Michael's journey and his teaching. So Michael was born 1947 in Florida. And, when you see pictures of him, you always see him with long hair, ponytail. He's wearing the same clothes. And, basically when you read The Surrender Experiment, which is basically somewhat of an autobiography, he refers to himself as a hippie. So he was basically quite a simple, young hippie dude. He was always, I would say from what I picked up on, a very sort of like intellectual and sort of very, genuinely interested guy in the deeper things of life. So, and very intelligent as well. And so he studied at the University of Florida, it was, first he did an economics degree, and then he went on to pursue to do a PhD in economics. And while he was doing that, that was basically his start of his spiritual journey. So all of that basically started with one particular incident, and it is actually similar to Eckhart Tolle's awakening. And I feel like some of the enlightened people we have still living today, the very few ones, and Eckhart Tolle is definitely one of them and right up there. Those people, I feel like oftentimes have like this one particular wake up call from where on everything basically changed, and it's literally just like a switch that was turned, and then from then on, nothing has been the same. And so for Michael Singer, that was a conversation that he had with a friend. They were just casually sitting on the couch, and they were talking, and then it was basically somewhat of a moment of silence. And in that moment, Michael noticed basically the feeling which we would describe in yogic terms as witness consciousness. So basically, he was witnessing himself and the voice inside of his head, his ego, whatever you want to call it. He was witnessing that separate from that voice. So he was basically really going back to his essential self, his Atman, the consciousness, and he was looking down on the thoughts that he has and the voice inside of his head going crazy about what to say next. And that out-of-body experience was something that really shifted the course of his life, and this deep sort of awareness of, wow, what is that constant chatter? What is that constant voice talking inside of my head, worrying, and thinking and doing and talking all the time, frantically about everything and everyone. And in that moment, he basically really realized that, and basically was able to establish the duality of like an object and a subject, right? He was like the subject, like the universal consciousness looking down at his personal self as the object. And it was just like, oh my God, what have I been doing my whole life? Just listening to that thing, and now I see that I am not that thing. I am not that voice. I'm the one who is listening to that. And then, all of the spiritual teachings go on about like saying, I am not the voice inside my head. I'm not the feelings in my body. I'm the one who experiences all of these things. Anyway, so he has this moment. And from then on, he basically went on to really make it a personal quest of his to investigate what that voice is. And I will sometimes also basically take something from already the conversation that I had with him. So basically what he told me is back then he was completely alone. There was no spiritual community like it is today out on social media. There were no, temples around, especially not in Florida, where you can just go, or, all of the books and all of the teachings, they were not as easily available. And also you, first of all, had to know what you're looking for, right? You had to know what kind of philosophies are basically maybe talking about that voice. So he made it a quest to investigate what and who or whatever that voice is. And he did so by reading every single book that you could find in the public library around, psychology, for example. So he studied intensely Freud and other philosophers of the modern times and also the ancient times. And he really couldn't find people who talk about the origin of the voice. So basically also with Freud, as Michael Singer always says, Freud talks a lot about what the voice does and how we can deal with it, in sense of like understanding it, but not like who is this voice, like where is it actually coming from. So he really wanted to go deeper than that. And then he found I think it was the third Zen patriarch, which is one of the deepest spiritual teachings, I guess, ever written. It's a Zen text, which is very, very old. And the first line is, is somewhat of, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And everyone who knows Michael Singer's teaching knows that, having no preference is basically also the segue, the gateway into freedom and liberation of the ego. So anyway, he found those books on Zen, and he was like, oh my God, finally I found people who talk about that voice. They talk about this all the time. Stillness of the mind, being the witness, becoming empty, beginner's mind, Zen mind, beginner's mind, and all of that. So he started on studying intensely Zen, and he started meditating. So he studied and meditated a lot, and it basically impacted his whole life to the degree of where he then started to go out into the woods with some money that he was given by his parents as a student loan, as I believe. And he used that money to purchase a tiny piece of land just outside of Alachua in the forest, where he then just drove with his camper van to first meditate. And then he started to build a little shed, a little house, where he could then, in complete solitude on his own, investigate that voice, come into stillness and meditate and contemplate. And as I also later found out, and by talking to him and experiencing him, he took that very, very, very serious. Like he was committed. I'm telling you, like he literally shut down everything, and he was like, I'm going to sit down until I figure this out, until I figure out that voice. And he wanted to drop out of uni. He wanted to not do his PhD. He wanted to not pursue any worldly things anymore. He just wanted to be by himself meditating. And so he ended up basically, I'm going to skip a couple of steps because otherwise this is going to go on forever. But basically, he started then building out the temple of the universe, as it is later referred to. And he started building that in the woods of the forest, in outside of Alachua. He started building that hut, and it got bigger and bigger, and it ended up being the temple of the universe. So like a beautiful wooden building. You can find pictures everywhere in the internet if you search for it. And he then started to attract people, not actively, but it was basically just like sort of the message was spread, like the guy meditating in the woods. And then there was like on Sundays, there were people coming, starting like, oh, can I meditate with you? And that's how basically a whole sort of community was slowly but steadily forming around the temple. He then also got approached by a police officer who asked him once on the property, like, are you the owner here? And he was like, yeah. And then he was asking him, who built this? And Mickey said, it's me. It was me who built it. And so then the police officer went on saying like, oh, okay, so I have like a project at my house. I need a garage, I think, to be built. Can you do that for me? And it's funny because like Mickey also told me that, that was one of the many instances in his life after his awakening where he heard and listened to the voice inside of his head saying, I don't want to do this, but, still doing it and surrendering to that voice to just, follow the flow of life and to see where it will take him. And basically, so then he started a construction business out of that called Built with Love. That was his first company. And he, basically grew that quite substantially to a successfully running business. And meanwhile, the temple was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people were coming and traveling to it. And he also hosted several retreats for big yogic teachers who are coming all the way from India and used the temple as sort of like a gathering space for their presentations and teachings and lectures and everything. So that was, it really started to pick up from there. He then, as soon as the first computers came out, was drawn into the world of technology. So basically, I think he described it as going into like an electronics store once, and when entering, he saw like this first kind of version of a computer, and he was just like taken aback, and he was just like, wow, this is amazing, and I can press these buttons and that something changes on the display, like this is amazing. Back then it was like obviously the digital revolution. So he took home the computer and he started programming in the middle of the woods and working on a medical program for which later would become the medical manager, which is like a digital tool for doctors' practices to digitalize patients' files. I hope I put that in the right way in English terminology. But basically, he completely revolutionized the way that doctors' offices and practices were storing and managing the data of their patients by medical manager, and it spread out all across North America, and it became the largest software in that field. He ended up growing this business into a 1,300 employee endeavor, unbelievably big. It was listed at the stock exchange, and so it just became a huge success. And he served as CEO of that company, all while maintaining his spiritual practice, all while still living in the woods and going to the temple twice per day in the mornings and evenings for services. So as Mickey often says, there was no separation between his worldly life, his professional life and the work at medical manager, and his spiritual life, and that is obviously also what then became his teachings. And that's why also I'm assuming so many other people are resonating with the teachings, because they are so grounded in reality and grounded in practical spirituality. Because Mickey lived a very successful worldly life while doing all of these very spiritual things and applying them in the workspace. And that being said, that's also something that I can wholeheartedly recommend, and that is the Untethered Soul at Work. So that's like an audiobook which transfers the teachings that he's delivering from the Untethered Soul, his first big book. Gonna come to that in a second, and he puts that into a work context. Unbelievable, and how you can see every work interaction as a spiritual experience. It's great. It's really, really great. I can really recommend that. Anyway, so he then he was later then hit with a lawsuit that he faced, in which he was severely getting into trouble, and was raided by the FBI in a nationwide investigation, like really helicopters. We're talking, investigators raiding the whole property of medical manager overnight, pulling up with like all sorts of agents, and shutting down the whole operation for months and years. So that whole trial went on for, I think, 6 years in total. It was something, I think it was around money that was basically being gone missing or being misused. And so he was accused by a fellow board member, I believe, to have initiated all of that, which later turned out to be not true. But obviously, those 6 years of being in constant unknowing and potentially fear of being incarcerated and being locked in prison has shifted the life of Mickey again in a profound way. And as he later basically points out, this journey of the lawsuit was initiating his process of writing The Untethered Soul, which became his New York Times best-selling book, worldwide bestseller. I think it was translated in more than 40 countries and languages, and it sold over 4 million copies, I believe. Unbelievable. He then went on to write The Surrender Experiment, which is basically somewhat of an autobiography, but also includes obviously the teachings of letting go and letting the beauty and the beautiful flow of life take over, and let go of the ego, of the mind that obviously only knows very little around what this life actually has to offer for us, and instead trust intuition and the higher guidance of God or the universe, whatever you want to call it. So that is, in a nutshell, I believe, Mickey's vita and his journey. The Untethered Soul obviously encapsulates the wisdom that he, by intensely studying yogic practices, meditation, self-awareness, contemplation, and basically yogic philosophy, and it puts it in a very practical code and applicable techniques, although Mickey always says that he doesn't teach techniques, but basically he does in some ways by really thoroughly explaining how we can let go of our impulse of constantly following the voice inside of our heads that tells us what to do, what kind of things to pursue, and what to push away, what to cling to. So all of that, for all of you beautiful yogis out there, will obviously make a lot of sense, because he is, and he always refers to that himself to as a Jewish yogi. So, and that's also something that I really like about Mickey, that he's combining the wisdom of all sorts of different religions, and he puts them together. And just also, the Temple of the Universe is a place for all religions, people of all beliefs, to come together and realize the power of themselves, that the kingdom is truly within. All right, that was a mouthful. I could go on and on about this, but basically that was the story of Mickey. And basically, now I want to move on to the second chapter, which is around the temple and the atmosphere of the Temple of the Universe, a real spiritual haven. So the Temple of the Universe, as described in all of his books, now grew into a whole sort of institution by itself. He never advertised anything. He never spread the word in any way, shape, or form around it. He literally just, like I said, set it up for himself to have a quiet space in the woods to meditate and retrace. And it just naturally, organically grew more and more. And so I was obviously very, very excited to go there. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool for all of us to have the opportunity to go someplace and to get the opportunity to meet Mickey, because he's there, he's living there, to meet him there and to do all of that in a very casual way. You don't have to sign up, you don't have to pay, you don't have to, no, you can just literally just go there, and practice with them and see for yourself. And I found that idea and that trust in humanity, especially nowadays, very refreshing. You don't see much of that today. Everything is being commercialized and, I don't know, sort of, capitalistically taken advantage of, but not the temple of the universe. And so I embarked on this journey, and before I did go to the US, I reached out to the temple of the universe and I let them know, like, hey, I'm Maxi, I'm a very devoted spiritual seeker, and I'm a huge follower of Mickey and his teachings, and also Paramahansa Yogananda, which is his guru, his teacher again. And so I've read all of the books, I've read all of the the scriptures and everything, and I really would love to, potentially talk to him on the podcast, but essentially just visit. And then I just wanted to ask basically how that works, and if I have to be aware of anything, or if I can just roll up. And basically they got back to me by saying just that, just come by, and we'll take care of you, and you're always welcome. And then it's funny because then I think a day or two later, I received another email of Karen. And Karen, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Where she basically said, sometimes Michael will offer one-on-one guided walks with people, and he would like to offer you that opportunity. And I was just like, oh my God, what? Yeah, I was completely flabbergasted, like the dream come true, literally. And so, after having read and listened for hours and hundreds of hours to all of his teachings, the opportunity to go there and meet him in person was obviously just unbelievable for me. So that was a little bit of the story leading up to that. And then I, basically, let them know when I'll be there. And I had an RV at the time, so I was driving there with the RV and arriving. And it was really, you arrive in Alachua, which is like a small town, one main big road, surrounded by many, many trees, beautiful nature, hot springs and whatnot. No, not hot springs, but they have springs, Ichitagni springs and stuff. It's like a beautiful area in Florida. And you just go, into the woods off the main road, and you drive for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes around the corners and stuff. And then you turn left into a small little street, and it leads you to the temple of the universe. And all of a sudden, there it is, the sign, and it has like a designated parking area. And it's, I parked the car and I went in, and then I just found the place, and remembered it from all of the stories that I've heard around it, and the pictures that I saw online. And there was a surreal experience, really. And from the moment I set foot on the land, I definitely felt the grounding energy and all of the spiritual work that has been done on that land. You can really feel the power and the level of consciousness, like the frequency of that place is very high. And so I went in and took off my shoes and met actually Karen right at the entrance, and then was welcomed by a yoga class. So there's like complimentary yoga classes, I think once or twice a week. And it was packed, the whole thing was packed. So just got my mat, and we, which was good for me to arrive and get straight into the body, because my mind was going crazy with like, oh my God, like this is all happening, and also something that really stood out from that first moment of like entering the temple was just the authentic vibe, the intimate atmosphere of the whole place. And I also realized that, many people who were present, they knew each other, and it was like a big family, basically, like a big, very tight, intimate community. And all of the pictures were still up on the walls, and it just immaculately maintained, and it is completely basically original, as it was when Mickey built it in the 70s. It's completely untouched. And Karen later on went ahead and told me that they literally did not modify anything. It's all still original. There's like a small part of the floor that they had to rebuild because it was breaking. But other than that, everything, every picture, everything is basically been just as it is, and being left as it is since the 70s. And so that was very special to be immersed in that temple atmosphere. And so we did the yoga, and afterwards we roll up the mats, and then there is a talk night that Mickey gives. I think it is Monday. It is Monday night, Thursday night, Monday night, Thursday night, and Sunday, I think. I think those are the 3 talk nights. Although Sunday it is during the day. I think it's in the morning service. But anyway, he has Monday and Thursday, I think, are talk nights where he then gives a talk, and then afterwards there is Q&A, so you can ask your questions. So everybody's sitting down on the meditation pillows, and I helped put them on the floor and arrange them. And then there is the chair being put in the middle, and the keyboard for some songs that you're singing then. And then everybody is going into a little bit of a meditation prior to the start of the talk night. And that's really for the first time where I then also really arrived in the space, dropping into what is alive within and really sitting with that. And that was also the moment where I completely lost it. Like I was just sobbing and crying and really being, I got super emotional and overwhelmed. Also, personally, where this year has taken me, and, also to go back and reflect on the impact that, the teachings of Mickey had on my life, how they impacted me and my relationships for the better. All of that was just like flying by, and I was just sitting there and tuning into that and feeling and holding space for myself in that way, and being eternally grateful to be having the chance of going there and having that experience and witnessing all of that and feel that energy just like firsthand. It's just such a privilege, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, moving moment to see all of the teachers, on the wall, and, Jesus right next to Mer Baba and Yogananda and Holy Mary and Ganesha, and, all of the different religions just coming together. And it was a very, very beautiful experience just to be there. And yeah, once then, it got fuller and fuller. And then, at some stage, Mickey was also entering. And yeah, I guess that's where I'll then move on to now to the third chapter of like talking a little bit about Michael Singer and how I perceived him. So, I barely noticed him actually when he entered the room, because he was so quiet and private and just really introspect and humble, and he and I really observed how genuinely committed he is in his personal sadhana and in his practice. So obviously, the temple is around for more than 50 years, and he has been doing his spiritual practice and all of the things that he's doing twice a day for so many years. He was doing it all along, and not only because now I am there, and to just see him so genuinely and authentically engage with the teachers, it was so moving. The way that he pays respect to them, he goes up to the altar and he greets them and he smiles, and I don't know if he's like crying or something, but he's so genuinely happy just looking at the photo of Yogananda and like greeting him with his hand and exchanging energy in that way, and feeling the frequency of all the great masters, and how he has it just so genuinely thanking them and being in deep gratitude towards their service to humanity in sharing the deeper wisdoms. That is something that was unbelievably inspiring. Like I said, to know that he has been doing that for more than 50 years, by himself, and now just because there's more people, he's still the same devoted seeker, and that is something that is unbelievably inspiring. And just by his clothes as well, he wears the same clothes in all the interviews you'll ever see of him. He's wearing the same sort of bluish sweatshirt and his beige pants, and that's just what he's wearing, and that's just how he is. He's a very simple man in that regard. He's not fancy on clothing, watches or something. No, he's just coming in like everyone else, and he's just practicing, and paying respect. And he then, sings songs with you in the talk nights. He's opening with some chanting, some mantras, which the kirtan was just unbelievably moving, and also like a big takeaway is just like, if more people, I'm telling you, and that also could be, and we talked about it on the podcast as well, just the last episode, or like one of the latest episodes with Dr. Benjamin Doolittle from Yale University. Organized religion has a place, of course it does. It's all around community, and when you come together as a community and you sing, and you pray together, obviously that is a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. It can unite people and bring them together in a beautiful way. And, I just also went on further to cry and cry and cry and cry and cry just over the horrendous things that are happening around the world. And then at the same time to experience the like unconditional love in spaces when you're just like repeating, I don't know, some mantras and you sing to Ganesha or whatever it is. It's just so beautiful, and you really wonder like how. Well, actually, you don't wonder. Actually, it makes perfect sense why all of these horrific things are happening around the globe, because we are just utterly disconnected from our true core. And by remembering and going back to this core, we find out what it actually is to be human again. And that was beautiful. So that was something, he will sing and chant then. And I feel like also something that is worth mentioning is just like the community around the temple. It's really like a family in and of itself. Like there's the property of the temple is so big because Mickey purchased, and he describes it in the surrender experiment beautifully, whenever there was the chance of acquiring property bordering the temple, he took the opportunity and purchased it. And so over time, the property of the temple just grew. And it now is just humongous. It's just unbelievably big. And it spreads out across acres and acres and acres. And obviously there's houses in there as well, on the property of the temple. And all of the people who live there, many of them 20, 30, 40 years, so many of them are coming to the temple as well to practice there, and it's just like this huge communal gathering spot for the community around the temple for just, and those are not, not like dreadlock, spiritual, hippie kind of dressed people. No, it's just like ordinary, just normal people coming there, going on doing their job during the day, and then in the evenings and in the mornings they come and they have the service. And that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful. Wanted to have said that. And how they welcomed me is so heartwarming. So again, shout out also Bianca and so many of the other lovely folks there. I so much still have you in my heart, and it was really, really, really special for me. So just wanted to also have said that. Alrighty, now I move on to the heart piece of this episode, which is my takeaways and my learnings and my encounter then with going on a walk with Michael Singer. So on Sundays, as I've mentioned, there is a Sunday service, and then there's afterwards a gathering outside of the temple. And that's where we all came together, and there's a huge book table, and you can just exchange and, share whatever is alive, whatever the talk was bringing up, and so on and so forth. And after many other people were getting their books signed by Mickey and their questions answered, it was my turn to go on a walk with him. So, yeah, I also want to mention that I have spent around a week prior to that walk on the temple grounds, and I've going in and out of morning and evening services. And also during, I think the first or second day I was there, Karen was introducing me to Mickey already, and that was my first one-on-one interaction with him, and already so special. Obviously, people who are as deeply immersed in the spiritual teachings as people like Michael Singer, the aura that they emanate and the energy is very, very powerful. And so it was just like a feeling of deep, trust and tranquility and peace that he was emanating, and he was therefore sharing with me, and also so approachable, and so we said hi, and we shook hands, and I just said, Mickey, it's an unbelievable honor to meet you, and that I just from the bottom of my heart thank him for everything that he has done for me, but then also for all other beings on this planet by sharing these teachings in the way that he did and still does. And so it's just also like saying namaste. And then he was also bowing in front of me, and he was just like, yeah, namaste, Maxi, namaste. It was just Michael Singer bowing to me. I mean, it's just incredible. So that was the first encounter. So then he obviously, we saw each other twice per day already for nearly a week. So I guess we were somewhat familiar. And then, yeah, we just started to go on a walk. And, he asked me a couple of questions around where I'm from in Germany. And he told me a couple of stories from his relationship to Germany and whatnot. And yeah, then we hit the ground running, and I just basically told him around my struggle, I guess. And as I am, also in touch with so many beautiful people, somewhat of a surrender community, as I like to call it, of people who really, read the books, who listen to the podcasts, who exchange their experience with the teachings with me. Out of that, I just extracted some sort of like an extract of, this very big questions of like, okay, I think I understood and we've understood the theory behind surrender or some parts of it. But in some ways, there is still sort of like this maybe contradiction or like uncertainty of like then really how to handle life. And in my case, I was just like basically just laying it all out in front of him. And I was just like, okay, like I'm, turning 30 next year. I'm looking back at a career of like 10 years in like corporate marketing sort of things. And I'm not resonating with that anymore. And I don't feel like I'm fully like in service to the best of my abilities. And I want to be of service, I want to really, be of service. I want to be the hollow tomb. I want to be the vessel of whatever, God and the universe wants me to be, and to work the way through me so I can just, show up as the vessel for the divine, and how I can best, do that. And all of that while not obviously being led by my preferences, and how I can basically navigate that, being of service and make decisions while at the same time not giving into sort of like ordinary worldly preferences. Because I think that is something that so many of us try to do, right? We try to surrender to the flow of life, but at the same time we have to consciously sometimes make decisions, right? And so I was just like explaining that a little bit, but obviously like Michael knows exactly what I'm talking about straight right off the bat. And so he literally, and that's also like a shift in the energy that he was like emanating and how he's talking. He grabbed my arm and he was just like stopping me in my tracks, and he really sort of made it a quest to really dial me in to what is actually happening. So he was like really grabbing my arm, and he was like, will you just see what is happening? And he kept saying the following. He's like, we are spinning on a planet in the middle of nowhere. Do you understand that? 1.3 million Earths fit inside the sun. Do you understand that? Look around. You are focusing on your tiny little piece of consciousness, which is then focusing down on your, the divine consciousness, the cosmic consciousness, everything there is, God, the universe. This awareness, you focus that awareness just on your personal little tiny ego mind. And he was like, look around, just this field alone, how big is that compared to the tiny little aspect that you're looking on and focusing on for your whole life? Just look around here. That is already big. Now imagine if you're just opening that up even further. There is nothing you know. And he was like constantly reminding me of zooming out and seeing this bigger picture, and therefore basically arguing and saying, like, dude, it doesn't matter. He literally would say, like, it doesn't matter what you think you're doing and what is good and bad, and all of these things are just concepts. And then he was basically going on to say, when I'm telling him, oh, Mickey, I want to be of service, all I'm doing is just like I'm replacing the concept of basically, I want to have a Rolex, I want to have a Porsche, I want to have a house, a wife, children, la la la. I'm replacing that concept with a concept of I want to be of service. But it's energetically, spiritually, the exact same thing. The exact same thing. You just replace it with a spiritual concept. And so he's like, as long as you're doing that, as long as you are still applying any sort of concept to your life, you will be caught in the spiral of your mind and in the spiral of a lower frequency of consciousness. You will not be able to liberate to the highest degree, to let the Shakti flow to like in the most free way, to express and free all of the energy that is stored within you. You won't be able to do that if you still carry any sort of concept within your system. And that is something that I actually already have realized during the time I was there and the talks that he was given, because just like the sincerity of the teachings and how deep they go. And that's also something that I told him then. I believe that not even 1% of the listeners and of the readers and the followers of Michael Singer and his teachings understand how deep those teachings actually go and what that actually truly means. Because true surrender is to let go of every, and I mean every little aspect of yourself until there is nothing left, nothing of your personal ego. And Mickey really locked me in on that. He was like, if there's like a tiny bit of you left, you won't go up all the way. And like I said, I don't feel like the people really understand that. So all preference that you have, all personal ego, all sense of identity of who Maxi is, who Peter is, who Laura is, who Jessica is, like whatever, whoever, like your personal story that you make up, and how you want to be in the world, even if those are spiritual things that you want to do in the world, they are still concepts, they are still preferences to let go of. So basically, he was then further on dialing me into like, okay, so what you do, you just ask yourself with every step of the way, what can I do completely free of myself to raise the moment in front of me to the best of my abilities? To raise the moment selfishly, without ego, without needing anything from it, without wanting anything from it, without changing anything with it. How can I best serve the moment in front of me? Then he went on to say this, how can I serve the moment to the best of my abilities, can obviously look very differently, like it can also mean to say no to someone, which is obviously also a common misconception around so many theories around surrender, because it's like, surrender, I just give in, I just give up, I just, let everything happen to me, I don't do anything anymore. Well, no, because to raise the moment in front of you to the best of your abilities is sometimes also saying no to people because they want to hurt other people. So you want to step in. That can also be, that's like an active surrender, Whereas a passive surrender could also be to not give in to some sort of like urge that you have to, I don't know, pursue some sort of career opportunity or something. Because if you really ask yourself, what is my intention? Why am I doing this? You often, most of the time, will end up, when you're really honest to yourself, you'll end up like, yeah, okay, I want something from this moment. I will need something from that. I need validation. I need appreciation. I need attention. I need to be seen, loved, understand, whatever, I need something from this moment. That's why I'm engaging in buying a car or whatever. So really asking on what is the intention, and then it's like, okay, like I cannot serve this moment in front of me to the best of my abilities if I want or need something from this moment. So that was obviously a big one. Just realizing, letting go entirely of everything until there is nothing left anymore. And something that I then went on to ask him, which is something that I came across of his teachings, like not many times, actually very few times, very, very few times, is the concept of Mickey saying that once like an alcoholic. So basically you make a progress. So you surrender, basically. You surrender, you let go another part of yourself, until the point where you are tempted again. And that's like with an alcoholic, right? You go 10 years without having a drink, and then there's like a drink coming. And I asked him, because I heard him say that only once or twice, that if you engage with that again, you erase all of the progress that you've made right up until this point, and you are back to square one. And I was asking him that, I was like, did I understand that correctly, that is the way? Is that what you're saying, that like all of the progress is gone and you start from ground zero again? And he was like, yep, exactly that it is. Because you reprogram yourself again into giving into those lower frequencies, into giving into those preferences. And I was just like, oh my God, like, wow, I don't think anyone understands that, And that leads me to my next point, which is also something that really wholeheartedly I believe is one of the biggest misconceptions and maybe mistakes or something that people do when listening and following Mickey's advice. And that is, people read the surrender experiment and they maybe even subconsciously believe and think and wish to end up living the same life as Mickey has and had lived, in terms of like the abundance. So basically they surrender into abundance. They surrender into wealth. They surrender into a lot of money and all of the worldly things that Mickey obviously has achieved, He is a multi-millionaire. For sure he is. But I think that's just his story. And that's also really what I picked up on when speaking with him. It's just like, that's just his story. He never wanted something out of it. And that's also something, like I described him, he had nothing really to lose. He was fine with living in the woods with having nothing, no material possessions. He has given up everything already. So that was his default setting. He never strived to be successful. So basically, from a materialistic point of view, from a Western capitalistic point of view, his journey could only go one way, which is like up, if you want to say so, because he was fine with living with very, very little, And I believe that so many people subconsciously, like I say, think, I surrender and then I will end up with the same wealth and abundance as Mickey has. I'll be successful one day, because, everything will come to me. And that is, I'm telling you, that's the biggest misconception. That's the biggest sort of, misunderstanding of his teachings. Because surrendering in your life, in your incarnation, can look very, very different to how it is for Michael Singer. You end up maybe in a one-room apartment, I don't know. But you will be happy inside, and that's what counts, That is true surrender. Right? And me personally, I certainly had to go into somewhat of an introspective journey to really ask myself that. Because like I said, there's so many layers to that. But subconsciously, I was like, okay, I surrender, and then I will let the Shakti flow, and I will remove those blocked energies, and then I will be vibrating so high that I'll be attracting abundance, also worldly abundance. And then everything will be fine, also materialistically. But it's just not the case. Not automatically, not automatically. That's what I'm saying, And obviously also you don't need it anymore then, because you'll just be completely filled with love and abundance from the inside. But those are the real teachings. And to understand the significance and the depth of those teachings by letting go of every little single aspect is obviously also the highest way. Like, we are talking about awakening, like enlightenment. We are talking about and that is also something that he basically told me. He was like, so dude, I'm gonna tell you the harsh truth because I know that you are a really devoted seeker. But I cannot speak to anyone like that, because people want, sometimes, they are at a different part of your journey. But, you come here all the way from Germany. So you want to know, right? You want to know the truth. So the truth is, and then like I said, he went on to say, like, you let go of every little single thing of ego that you have within you. Every little bit of resistance. And he was like, ask me of how many things I had to let go of and how many things I did in my life that or my ego did not want to do. So many things I did not want to do in my life. So many things I didn't want to do in my career. And I still did them because I had something to give to the moment in front of me. I could raise it because I was capable. I had the intellectual capacity. It was being put in front of me and I could serve it. So I did. And like I said, we are talking about the highest and highest and highest of states that there is. We're talking about freeing yourself, liberating yourself from the ego, which is, spiritually speaking, the highest path you can walk, This is the great way of all the masters. And therefore, this is not a walk in the park. This is really, really, really a commitment that you make. And also, he said that to me many times. It has to be the number one priority of your life. Above all relationships, above everything, it needs to be the commitment to free yourself of yourself. Free yourself from yourself. So those are some of the biggest takeaways. We then later on went on to he showed me around a little bit more of the temple grounds by car. Like I said, it's unbelievably big, and he showed me around the old grounds of the medical manager. He showed me around where the Untethered Soul was written and the process of that, the process of the lawsuit, and I don't know, we just had a great time. It was really relaxed, and how many huge names he was in contact with and in touch with, Russell Brand, Oprah, Tony Robbins, they're all personal friends of his, and I don't know, and I was just there with him, sitting in his car and listening to his stories and asking all of what I wanted to know. And to experience that was just an enormous privilege, as you can imagine. And, he also, actually, I forgot something that I also wanted to quickly weave in here, because I asked him, why, so, if God or the creator or universe, I wanted to know why. That's also a question I had. Like, why is it so hard for us humans to go through all of this? Why do we have to liberate ourselves? Why is it so hard to overcome the ego to then experience pure abundance inside? And he's like, it's not our turn, our place to ask why. But then he was just quoting Mirror Baba, and he just said, the best he can say is just quote him and say, basically, God went out on a whim, and just said, that's how I'll do it. And that's with what we are working on. And that's obviously, and out of that grows truth. And the truths that I just shared with you around what Mickey shared with me around the teachings. So that obviously it has nothing to do with me. I certainly have not realized more than any of you have. And, I left the place, and hugged him. And, he also said, we can, I'm always welcome and reach out anytime I need something and I have questions. And I leave this place with so much peace and trust and sheer knowledge around surrender, around these teachings. And I'm also asking myself if that is really the life that I, in this incarnation, want to live. Because I was extremely committed, and I am, to free myself from myself. And now I know what it actually means. And I feel like every one of us, you included now, listening and watching, we need to ask ourselves individually if that is the life that we can imagine living. Are we truly willing to make this our pole star, around which we create everything else in our life, but put that first? Is that what we truly want? Because it is a commitment. It's not you cannot half-ass surrender. It's either full in or out. It's nothing in between. Although, so that's a theory, right? That's like, and I believe that's a truth. I truly believe that. Just neutral, objective truth. I truly believe it. It's what all the great, it's all what the great teachings has said, that's basically what it is. And I also believe that there is, black and white, and then there's 50 shades of gray in between. And I really believe that there is a lot of benefits that you can get out of implementing surrender. So now I'm speaking from a very individual, personal standpoint. And I know many people in my surroundings who had great revelations from surrendering that way, is by really letting go of the resistance to also little tiny things in everyday life, and how that basically impacts your well-being. There's so much to be gained. And it definitely, I feel like, is improving my life in every facet, like all the relationships, all my work, like everything work related, my interpersonal, romantic relationships, family relationships, how I deal with myself, and all of that. So basically it goes into all areas of life, and it makes me a better person for sure. And then there is this whole other aspect of raising my frequency to the level of where Michael Singer, for example, is, and that's no judgment here. No, this is good, better, or whatever. But I'm just saying, you just need to ask yourself, are you really truly willing to surrender to that degree? Because you're going to be doing a lot of things that your ego doesn't want to do. That's what that means. And you're not getting what you want. Surrender is not about getting what you want. Not at all, actually. It's about for your soul to experience what it needs or wants to experience in this incarnation. And that can be physical pain. That can be sickness. That can be overcoming that. It can be living in tougher situations for a while and then, I don't know, maybe better later, whatever. There is no fixed path. It will reveal itself naturally, organically. It will, for sure. You can be certain of that. But do you trust the process enough without constantly having your hands on the steering wheel and trying to intervene because it doesn't go into a way that you want it to go? Ask yourself those questions. Ask yourself those questions. I feel like there's great power in asking yourself those questions and investigating that for yourself. And yeah, I can also wholeheartedly recommend you checking all of these things that I just shared about, especially going to the temple yourself, because that will obviously do so much more than I could ever put into words and share with you in this capacity. All right. I love you. And I thank you so much for listening. I would be honored to have you share with me what your personal connection to surrender is in the comments of this episode. What, your connection to spirituality and surrender and Mickey's teachings is. And yeah, just how you see, all of these things, maybe I'm sure you'll all be on your own individual paths and journeys, and there's so much to be learned, from each other. So I'm highly favoring and basically asking for your input, and the communication. This is not a one-way street. I'm not just sending out things. I'm also receiving from you. So with all that being said, thank you so much for listening. That was my experience at the Temple of the Universe with Michael Singer and going on a walk with him. And there is also like a few things that I did not share in here, but that is coming back to the beginning, just something that, I whatever I feel comfortable with sharing, because some things will forever be in my heart and I will keep them there. And also when it comes to him and how he's showing up, I feel like that's so personal and so intimate and also so individual. Like everyone will basically, say something different and experience it differently. So I, won't taint that picture too much, with my experience of it. All right. Namaste. I applaud you for being on this journey. Much love.